So anyway, we go from Donald Trump, who is having a miserable time right now, to the joyous side of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and their campaign that seems to be really on fire. In just 3 short weeks, not only are they changing the trajectory of the election, and Lana and I have talked about this before, and I will still say to this day that Joe Biden still would have won the election. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. It would have been way scarier up until this point, and it's still going to be scary from this point until now. But right now, everything seems to be going in her direction. There was recently a New York Times Siena poll that just came out. Lana, we're going to share this here, that Kamala Harris has taken over big leads in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. When I say big leads, we're talking about a 4-point lead. However, in these states, some of them, Joe Biden was down 7. So that's really an 11-point swing that happened between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in just 3 weeks. But Vice President Kamala Harris leads former Donald J. Trump in the 3 crucial battleground states, according to new surveys by the New York Times and Siena College, the latest indication of a dramatic reversal in standing for Democrats after President Biden's departure from the presidential race made it. There are a few things on here that I want to go down and look at. In general, how satisfied are you with the choice of candidates in this fall's presidential election? You could see all in May was 58%, and in August it turned to 73%. Here's the biggest switch here is Democrats 60% in May jumped all the way to 87% in August, and independents 45 in May, where Trump was the candidate. It goes all the way up to 60% for independents. That is a 15-point jump amongst independents. I don't see how any independents would say, I'm more satisfied because Trump is the candidate in August after they already knew he was. And then you can see there's only a 5% increase with Trump amongst Republicans. So, I mean, these are big swings, and we've talked about before. The polls aren't the end all be all for sure, but there are some trends to look at that make it very interesting. And as of right now, it feels like, because we would say this before, if the election were tomorrow, Trump may beat Biden. But right now, it feels like if the election were tomorrow, Kamala Harris feels like the winner.
Yeah, it feels good. However, we can't get complacent.
Never.
Yeah, we have to really, really come out in droves, like the numbers, because it is that thing where he's gonna cheat. Like, that's why he's not in these battleground states. Like, why not? Like, why is it? It's not just because he's tired. Like, Vance isn't even going to these states. Like, what is happening right now?
But he's not campaigning. He's just kind of, it feels like he's.
Well, that's the part that's a little everyone should be concerned about, right? Like, those are people who aren't going to certify those votes. They were just talking about it with Tasha Brown, I think, from Something Votes in Georgia.
Yeah, yep.
Like, they have those all new certifiers or whatever they're called in Georgia. They're all MAGA people, and Trump just called them by names the other day. Like, so they have them in place that aren't going to certify. And of course, that's against the law, but that could hold up the whole state from certifying if those counties don't certify, which is weird, right? Because it's like they're Republican counties that they won in, and they're going to be holding up Republican votes, but they don't care if it holds up the whole state. And they have deadlines that they have to get to. So I don't know how you rectify and resolve those things if they turn around and they do that? Can the Secretary of State override that? Like, what happens?
Well, the scary thing is that, does it go to the Supreme Court? If it goes to the Supreme Court,
Exactly.
then it's a dice roll because obviously this is an obvious against the law thing. This is just something no normal Supreme Court would rule in favor of. But this one freaks me out. But Lana, you ask, how do you overcome this? There is one way they can overcome this. And if you see the news now, this is not something that is a done deal, obviously, by any means whatsoever. But there is growing chatter that there's a certain state that I live in that just might be in play for Kamala Harris, that the red wave that washed over Florida in recent years might not be as large as it once seemed. If a new presidential survey is any indication, Vice President Kamala Harris is within striking distance of former President Donald Trump in Florida, according to the pollster behind a new USA Today Suffolk University WSVN TV survey of 500 likely voters released Tuesday. Trump leads Harris by 5 percentage points in the survey, but that's closer than the other recent polls and much less than Governor Ron DeSantis' 19-point blowout in 2022. And also within the poll's 4.4 margin of error, and another sign of the enthusiasm Harris has generated nationwide within the Democratic Party since she entered the race. Now, that is definitely very interesting news. And, again, I know in Florida there was a point where Trump had an over 10-point lead, and now it's down to 5, which shows that there is a gigantic shift in the state of Florida. And Florida is going to be a tough state to win because there was just another story that came out the other day that voter registration in Florida, Republicans topped Democrats by 1 million votes for the first time ever in the state of Florida. Wow. I think it was first time ever. So that's a lot to overcome. But obviously what you're going after are these independent voters. And as time goes on, just the more people we can convince that Donald Trump is nuts, and that he's not the person that you want to lead this country. And Kamala Harris is showing the joy, and Tim Walz is showing the joy, and they're showing the excitement and ending the old guard of all these people who are just making America nuts. You just got to hope that there are enough citizens in the state of Florida that say, I'm tired, I'm done, we're over this.
Right. So why is it like that? Are there just more Republicans in Florida?
So what happened was is that this big movement that Ron DeSantis created in Florida, they were making it this utopia for people who are trapped in New York and California, that they hated the Democratic way and they hated all this wokeness. So it's come to Florida. We don't have any state tax. We don't have any of those big taxes. We don't have anything like that. Come to Florida, and you are going to come to a unwoke paradise that your life is going to be so much better. So a lot of people from California and New York move down to Florida. The problem for them is they moved to Florida, and then they found out, there was nowhere to fucking live. Then they were forced to going into these rentals that were sky high. And now, because Ron DeSantis is playing games with climate change and the insurance companies in this state, the insurance costs are the highest in the country. They're double the national average. So people are spending way more money in the state of Florida than they had originally anticipated. And it might not be that paradise that Ron DeSantis promised them. But you know what? Because they're so brainwashed, they come here anyway, and they're like, Florida's awesome, because they're not going to have that book where they're talking about gay kids in the library or some shit. I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But that's what happened. We have a lot of people from New York and California that migrated here since the pandemic. That was the other thing, too. The big pandemic thing is that state of Florida, we're free here. We're going to be open. In fact, a lot of shit was closed in the state of Florida. So let's not act like Ron DeSantis opened everything up. He didn't, but there was a little bit more freedom post-pandemic, in the state of Florida. So people bought into it.
Gotcha. And they still vote Republican, although they're paying so much money in rent and insurance. And that's just, it's wild to me.
Yep. Yep, it really is. It's wild. But you know what? They do a phenomenal job. They do this magical job that Joe Biden's president. So we can't blame the governor. But you know what we will do? We're going to make fun of Gavin Newsom over in California. We're going to make fun of that governor because of the shit show in California. But everything that's happening in Florida, Ron DeSantis, what are you, crazy? He's awesome. It's Joe Biden's fault. That's what they do. And that's what they do with these people. And they just, again, we've talked about this a million times, where people continue to vote against their own interests because of this internal mechanism that allows them just to be angry about shit that means nothing.
Right.